What's up, guys? It's your boy Mason Beck. Welcome back to another episode of Minecraft Literature Edition. Today I'm joined by some friends.
Hello, YouTube. It's Rachel.
Hello, it's Carson.
It's Alex.
And we're here today presenting The Handmaid's Tale.
Yes.
And we're gonna go ahead and move on to our first station. Onward we go.
So, guys, we're moving through the barren desert because a lot of the storyline is based around how some of the women are super barren, and that's the whole point of having handmaids, is because they have viable uteri. But basically, we're coming upon our first stop, which is Offred. And Offred we chose to symbolize with a red sheep over here. She's got her white face, just like the white little wings that the handmaids have to wear, and the red to symbolize the cloak. We'll talk about the color symbolism a little later. But she's flanked by two quotes, two parts of one quote that says, "I try not to think too much, like other things now, thoughts must be rationed." And I thought that this encompassed a lot of Offred's character because she tries to stay really passive. When trying to think of an archetype for her, it was hard to even place her in the reluctant hero archetype because she's just so passive. She doesn't do anything really to better her situation other than sneak around with men, and we'll get to that later. But behind her, you may notice that there's another handmade sheep hanging from a noose, and that's because that happened in the book. The one before her hung herself, and it was an important point in the book. So yeah, is that not your horse?
Alright, mount up, and we will move on to our next station.
Whoa.
Onward.
Yeah.
And now we are coming upon...
There's the cactus.
I think I could just mute that.
Just leave that. It's fine.
We'll keep it in.
And now we've arrived at our second destination.
Tie your horse.
Our second destination, Serena Joy.
Serena Joy.
Serena Joy.
That sounds like an adult.
Serena Joy is the wife of the commander, and she is barren. And all the colors in here represent her. The blue is the color that all the wives have to wear, and it's a powder blue because it kind of, generally fades into the background behind the commander. And we have a garden surrounding the quotes because Serena Joy spends a lot of her time in the garden throughout the novel. And the quote here reads, "You can get up now," she said. "Get up and get out." There was a loathing in her voice, as if the touch of my skin sickened her. That was Offred referencing Serena Joy as they had just finished their little ceremony with the commander. And it's very clear that Serena Joy was very displeased with the ceremony, but had to go along with it because of societal pressures and men, how much they suck. And she's mostly the antagonist of the book against Offred for most of the novel. We're gonna go ahead and move on to our next destination. Here we go. And we have arrived very quickly at our next location. Welcome to stop 3, Moira.
So, Moira is pretty much Offred's foil. She's more active in her own fate and actively tries to escape and become a prostitute on her own accord to avoid being subject to the handmaid's sort of tale stuff, bad stuff. And so from the beginning of the book, she's very much represented by, the flashbacks that we see where she's smoking and she's very, rebellious and just kind of cool. But then, it's sort of towards the end, we have this quote where she is frightening me now, because what I hear in her voice is indifference, a lack of volitation. Have they really done it to her then? Taken away something? What? They used to be so central to her, where she meets her in this, prostitution ring that she, goes to for a bit, with the commander, and it changes her, she sees Moira changed, and just, this completely different person due to their situations.
Righteous. And we're going to go ahead and mount up again as we move on to our third destination. I'm stuck on the pole. Alright, there we go. and Moira.
Looks like Moira.
And we have arrived
God, that's funny.
at our fourth stop.
We can't tie up the horse. Hold on.
The commander. The
It
tie
doesn't
is
matter,
actually
we're good.
the tie is downstairs.
Wait, no, I got it. There we go. The horses. Okay. The commander. He is a very antagonist type of character, and we have this arm. We have this giant buff dude arm because he just displayed all these characteristics of this sort of toxic masculine character. He was really self-absorbed, and he was into all this sexual nonsense. And the rose in his hand symbolizes the fact that he was only really nice because he wanted to go to that really weird prostitution club, and he was like, this is the only time I'm ever going to be nice to anyone. Here you go. Here's something nice. But that's really not who he is as a whole. So we made a giant muscular arm.
Alrighty. Thank you. And we're going to go ahead, untie the horses, and move on to our next destination. We can do this safely.
You can do it, buddy.
Oh,
Alright, so this next stop here, we're talking about Nick, who is the guardian assigned to this family. Nick lives out in a shed in the backyard, basically, so that's what we built here. And it looks rather unassuming from the outside. You don't look at it too much, kind of much like Offred did until you go inside, which is kind of like the last 20 pages of the book when suddenly Nick becomes super important. And they suddenly have a very physical relationship. So basically, in the beginning of the novel, Offred notices like some weird vibes coming off Nick. One time he winks at her, and that's where we're getting the quote, "Perhaps he's an eye" from, because she wasn't sure if maybe he was testing her. But later on in the book, Serena Joy does say that she thinks that get off. She thinks that she thinks that Offred should sleep with Nick so that by extension she can get pregnant because of the whole handmaid situation. And in the end, Offred thinks that maybe she did, but we're not really sure. Anyways, Offred is talking to Nick about it, and she says that she wants the baby to be his, and Nick doesn't really say anything about it, because this relationship is entirely devoid of emotion. It's basically just, it's devoid of emotion. The beds have split. They don't actually love each other. So this is why Nick is a bit of a foil to Luke, because Offred in the past life sort of thing was obviously very in love with Luke, but this Nick situation is basically just for physical stuff.
And we move on to the next room, which is very
yeah.
close. Bam!
So the next segment here, we're going to start talking about symbolism instead of just characters. So this is our color room, obviously, because we have a lot to say about color symbolism. Much like in another book we read this year, The Great Gatsby, color symbolism is a really big, important thing. Specifically the color red, because all the handmaids are dressed in red and with their white wings. It's a very out there, bold color, so it's very obvious for people to see them when they're out on the street. They're very identifiable, which is definitely what this society wants for them. They want them to be seen. They want them to not be able to hide. They want everyone to know who they are so they can be protected at all times. However, in The Great Gatsby, red is a symbol that's, or a color rather, that's associated a lot with Tom because of his aggression and anger and passion. So they do have different connotations in each book, but overall the color symbolism is like just as important in each one.
Take my pants off. The pants are off.
We're recording!
Let's go, come on.
Go down, boys. Okay, so the first this symbolism that we see is the eyes, and so there are two major uses of the eyes. So one, there's the people who represent the eyes because they are always watching. They're a giant threat. They take away Offred at the end, and we also see the symbolism of the eyes and what people look at throughout the entire book, as Offred is often seen to choose what she looks at, choose what she doesn't look at. Like earlier, like pretty early on into the book, when they go to choose and to look at the wall with the hanged angel makers and other things. And this sort of sight and the use of her eyes are also restricted by the handmaid's white, like, little flaps that go around their eyes as a part of their costume. And so the quote we chose was that form of the eyes, which is, "With the commander, I close my eyes, even when I am kissing him goodnight. I do not want to see him up close, but now here, with Nick, each time I keep my eyes open." She doesn't choose to look at the commander when she's making love to him, but when she's making love to Nick, she chooses to see this and experience it with her own eyes.
Alright, we're gonna move on to our next destination.
I'll be down in a second. Hold on. What are you doing?
Ah, the horses are already.
Just leave them.
And we mount and move.
We ride. Oh, I'm stuck.
Oh, they're bound. Okay. We move on, and we feel like everybody's gonna enjoy this next bit as we come up on.
Everyone's favorite.
As we come upon our last example of symbolism in the Handmaid. Well, our last example of symbolism. It's the lingerie worn by Offred when she goes with the commander to the prostitution club. See, before, lingerie used to be a symbol of independence with women or men, but now lingerie is used as an asset of control for men to control women. So this is that symbolism, and we gotta go ahead and leave the horses. And we're gonna move on to our next semi-functional example of the writing style of The Handmaid's Tale.
Alright, so in The Handmaid's Tale, Margaret Atwood employs a very modernist style of writing. There's a lot of, like, very short, clipped sentences that give, like, a really... I am trying to speak! Anyways, they give, like, a really, unsettling sort of feel. Like, it seems like the reader is left in the dark on a lot of things on purpose to give a sort of disorienting type of vibe, much like this roller coaster is disorienting you right now. But yeah, so there's a lot of breaks in the stream of consciousness. Like, Offred directly addresses the reader, which is pretty common, or not common, but it's like a pretty identifiable asset of modernist writing. And there's a lot of non-continuity, I guess, in the actual timeline itself. There's a lot of flashbacks, like this man going backwards up the roller coaster. Take it easy.
Well, this is an excellent example of modernism. And we're gonna go ahead and move on to our final poetry analysis. And here we are. Poetry. Jack-o'-lantern by Maggie Morris. And this poem will be read by none other than Carson Dale Hart.
Okay. Jack-o'-lantern by Maggie Morris. Who got this? You scooped out my insides, scraped down the sides, carved out the edges, you were thorough. You gave me a face, one I did not want. You shaped my expression, and I had no say. I felt my face turn as a frown formed. Once you were done scooping and shaping, you put torches in me. You lit them on fire, and you left them to burn. I was messy, parts and melting wax, but I was fine. I could be fixed. There were more seasons left for me to have different faces and to feel less empty, but you also scooped out my power, my autonomy, and at the beginning of each new season, I still feel the messy parts and melting wax welling up inside.
So while you recover from that emotional reading, I'll do a little bit of analysis for you guys. So, okay. So this poem is about autonomy, and I felt that like this was really like it correlated with the theme of the book a lot, because like the main central point is that Offred and the other handmaids have lost their autonomy, and so there's a lot about like scooping out like who they once were, getting rid of their personality,
Guts.
giving them an expression that they might not have necessarily wanted, forcing them to be someone that they were not. And it was also just really convenient for a poem to be named Jack-o'-lantern when that's a block in Minecraft. So you're welcome. And that's a squid.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of
Thank you, guys.
English
Thank
Literature.
you, guys.
Whoa!